Hey everybody, my name's Kyle. This is my first time giving this presentation, so I please welcome any feedback, kind of testing with the flow and seeing how things go with this. I am a consultant with Improving that I have been working with Abercrombie & Fitch for, I think, 6.5 years now across a variety of products or projects. And this is a story of essentially the last 2 years that I've been there, working with them on saying, hey, it's time to update technologies. We know we need to do this. How are we going to get this done? For a decent variety of reasons. So, little piece about me. I've been in IT for the last 15 years. I started at a small company in wonderful Yellow Springs, Ohio, hour west of here that Dave Chappelle likes to make fun of all the time, where I got to really be that jack of all trades, everything from front end to keeping the servers alive at 6 o'clock in the morning after being there all night, because that's what it is. Came to Columbus, started working with Improving for 7, almost 8 years now. And it was Improving that drove me towards soft skills. I had learned all of these wonderful skills in terms of how to work with technologies and so forth, and then came to Columbus, discovered I don't know how to talk to anyone, as it turns out. I don't know how to communicate with different varieties of people and understanding them. So that really drove me towards soft skills and trust in particular, how to build it. And that's a portion of what we're doing here as well. I consider myself an agilist from the perspective of I don't believe there is one right answer in how to work. I want to support every team and whatever works for them and their way of working. So my quote of the morning, I've been reading a lot more recently, and this one comes from a book called Deep Learning in a Disorienting World. And I love this because this comes from 1970, so we're talking 52 years ago, of what's defined as the banking model of learning. And what it comes down to is about living and how we learn as we live, where everything we do, we go through an experience, we reflect on it, we theorize around it, take action on it. And it's that simple, continuous loop that happens every day of our lives. Lo and behold, it's agile defined literally 52 years ago. One thing I do want to introduce here is Abercrombie today. Abercrombie has a history, and it's done everything it can to learn from that history, and has really changed over. From a public's perspective, they do a lot of this, advertising and trying to really say, hey, things have changed. We're now very diverse in everything they do. They've been rated as one of the best places to work multiple times in retail. But what doesn't get seen is, of course, what's happening on the inside of the company, internally, within their different departments, within their IT departments. And that's what I wanted to reflect a bit here today, was saying this isn't just an outside world purview. This also happens significantly internally as well. What I also wanted to introduce you to, and so I'm going to do a full-blown presentation on this tomorrow, on the 6 types of working genius. This is a model that recently came out by Patrick Lencioni, and his consulting company, The Table Group, who own this one. And I decided to give this presentation going over these 6 portions of project flow that is defined by that. So I'll go over each one as we go through this presentation as a way of kind of doing that simple introduction for it. And the reason I did this is because you'll also find the spot where it actually helped me push this project through. And it's always fun how those sudden discoveries that you never expect, it's like, oh, hey, I learned this thing. Oh my gosh, this helps right now. And that's really what it did. So I really wanted to promote this at the same time. So what this started off with, so the first stage within that project flow is wondering, asking that question, how can we get better? Identifying those areas of improvement, what can we actually do? Not solving the problem, just asking those initial questions, and what really sparked all this. And so I was handed this book, Accelerate, out of coincidence, and I worked my way through it, and it's like, wow, we have an actual definition now of what helps define a high-performing team, or at least what correlates to high-performing teams. And so, hey, here's an area where we can work on and start improving there. And I hand this book over to one of the directors and say, hey, I think you should read this. Little did I realize he then handed it to other directors and other VPs, and suddenly, a couple of years ago, we actually have the acting CIO kind of saying, hey, by the way, we're now going to be focusing on this, which was awesome. Probably my biggest success as a consultant was handing the right book to the right person. Lord knows I can't sell anything, so at least the books can do it. The other piece that happened is that we finally had someone to kind of represent us as, for the client-side engineers, this technical lead, this product owner that can actually help prioritize taking care of some of the technical issues that we're having in order to assist these teams moving forward. Someone to assist, be that voice to the business of saying, hey, we have these other areas to take care of that we really need to focus on. And out of that came 4 measurements that really kind of allowed us to have direction with those questions and improvement tasks of how are we able to do this. These are the 4 measurements. If you have not seen these yet, I recommend looking at them, of what's defining high-performing teams. So deployment frequency, how often are we able to push things to production? Lead time for changes, being that amount of time it takes from that development point to production. Mean time to recovery, so if there is a problem, how fast can we recover from it? It's not about getting out there perfectly, but we do have mistakes, but we do want to reduce that. So rather than just saying, oh, deploy all the time, we still need to look at our change failure rates. How often do we need to push out fixes, and are we able to reduce those as well? So all 4 of these are very important to go together. You can't just do one, because you'll probably destroy the others. So you can't really see yourself as high performing on that front. What this really drove out of this, and really what assisted with this, that the book kind of promoted, and what we found along the way as well, was the lack of team autonomy. Our teams were stepping on each other's toes so much that we had meetings after meetings trying to make one simple change in the system before we could push it out to production. And this really drove how much we were able to start moving forward, is to say, you know what? If we can manage to separate these teams out, this might actually be doable. And really started getting us there. And I loved how, and we put so much effort in the past ramping up our tests and our test capabilities and all of this automation test without really noticing, there's other things out there that can actually assist even more than this. What our wonderful tech lead also did was he gave out a survey for all the engineers to take and really take in that feedback and see, okay, what is it that people really want? What is going to help you be more productive? What is going to unblock you? And a huge portion of that was also the choice of technologies. We were sitting on legacy software that very few people knew and would be impossible to hire for. You will notice that I am trying to stay away from technology names and such to try and stay more on the project management level, and hopefully not confuse anyone with that one, because I did want this to be a bit more generic on that front. Though I'll give one away at the end. But a huge portion of this was, letting the teams figure out what is that best tool for the job. Let's not limit us. Let's make sure that, and we have to take this at a holistic level. It isn't just what's the right tool that's going to be we can send this out there and it'll work. And it's yes, we want to. We have to keep things holistically. It's important to work with business and say, hey, what about from a recruiting factor? What about an educational factor? What about a longevity factor? Are we looking at tools that have been around a while, that have had appropriate support, and isn't just ooh, this is the brand new thing, let's use it. In every hour we have new frameworks coming out and then dying. We have to be very cautious with this. And pretty good chance, you might make a mistake along the way, and that's okay, which is another reason I wanted to give this, is to say it is possible to keep moving forward. What is not legacy software now will be legacy software in 5-10 years. And we know that because that's the change, and we need to be ready for this. So I promise I won't get into too much architectural detail here, but this was probably my first lesson learned within this, was the word microservices. So the fun part here is we were on microservices, and I put this in a quote for a reason. Because as far as the business knew, we made the shift to microservices a few years ago. What was interesting was that from a technical definition, there's certain portions of microservices, such as you can actually release something, that application, on its own. So when I tried to say we need to actually integrate microservices, the business was very confused, and I couldn't use this word anymore because I thought we were, and we did. But they were all pushed out together, and everything had to change together in a very monolithic fashion. And so while a portion of it was technically there, and it is a good stepping stone there, I couldn't really use that term and have people understand it. And so that's where I really started to get to, okay, let's talk about releasing independently. Let's create that team autonomy where a team can focus on one or two applications, and they're not dependent on other teams. And really focus on the terminology and the goal set rather than terms that may be a bit more manipulated there. And so as part of this, we've defined our dream, right? We want to focus on these metrics. We want to be seen as a high-performing team. And everyone can kind of comprehend those metrics. Part of that is we want to create this autonomy. We have 4 client-side feature delivering teams that are delivering the website today. We wanted to separate them from the back-end teams focused on delivery, which has to deliver services to multiple applications, not just the website. At this time, they are focused on the website, making changes for the website, and then our wonderful apps team would complain and say, hey, what did you do to the APIs? Because as far as they were concerned, they didn't break the website, so they were good. Not really thinking about every other team that is also within that e-commerce sphere, within that IT sphere. And the other piece of this was, let's actually choose that technology for the client, for the website, in one that we know we can grow, that people are driven to really work in, and also overall perform better, allow us to create this continuous delivery, allow us to define tests in an appropriate fashion and get more test coverage. And so people are comfortable delivering more rapidly, more often. But we also know we had some challenges coming in, the first of which is money. If there's one thing I've learned to do, it's to listen and not judge. Abercrombie has a very specific financial structure. It is there for a reason. That comes with its own challenges. We knew going into this project that there would be little to no money driven directly towards this project. So how do we start this incremental replacement without that money there? We do have some room for technical debt. And by definition, that is what I'm doing. I am not changing the user experience. I'm simply doing the faceless on the back end. This is pretty much the core definition of technical debt. We're improving things on the back end, or in the invisible side of things, from what the business would normally see, for the purpose of improving our delivery capabilities, right? And as we know, tech debt is very hard to argue for when it's needed. A lot of trust is needed to know, oh, will this improve things? Okay, sure, we're just going to trust you on that. But now we also have measurements to help drive that trust. And we can know whether we are successful or not. Going dark is not an option. This was something I greatly pushed for, and a lesson that they had learned in the past that unfortunately did drop a lot of trust. They had, the funny part about this, they called it the Phoenix Project. Thankfully, it's not as bad as the Phoenix Project for those who have read the book. But it started off as a 3-month estimation that turned into 2 years to replace one page on the website. And yeah, that definitely did not work out very well from that trust perspective. Was it successful? Depends who you ask. That's going to be very driven there. However, this was not a risk we wanted to take. New features are what's driving an increase in revenue and needs to keep being delivered. So going dark and not producing something was not something within the realm that we wanted to do. We want to keep delivering value for the business. That's what our goals are. We are in line with the business on that. So we need to replace it incrementally. Take it one step at a time. How can we actually push through these changes one step at a time, where we can also drive the new features inside of the new technologies, so that because we definitely don't want to replace them later, or we would never catch up. We had to assume we know nothing. Large website, many features, decent amount of turnover in the past. So how are we going to size this project and lay everything out, assuming we don't actually know how everything works or what all the features are? Lots of switches. Note that this is a worldwide application. The same code that's here is focused on China and the rest of Asia. Same thing in Europe, across 6 different languages. Legal has to work across all of it, and I assure you, you do not want to screw up anything with legal. To top it off more, there's 5 brands. Note that same code runs all 5 brands. All 5 brands have different variants. If I want to know what's happening on a single page, I have to go look at every region across the world, every brand, to see what are these variances that need to happen, and then probably also look at the code to see what switches are there that were there. Hopefully we can delete a few things. And then no Frankensteining. This is kind of coming from we're learning from history, where UX really gets angry at you if you manage to change one thing on a website and it doesn't look like anything else, as it turns out. So still can't screw anything up there. So we're going to start going into the invention side. So the invention side is OK, we've asked our questions, we have our challenges. How are we going to solve this? The main thing here, and so this was kind of that end strategy, and what I'll point out here is we have 4 client-side teams pushing things into the website, all focused within this single code base, all releasing at once. So we're employing something that's referred to as micro front ends. Not very often used. I kind of call it that worst case scenario because there's a lot of challenges that come with it. But in this case, it was OK, let's lay this out. Let's see if this can actually work. So all 4 teams are going to be able to release to their own code bases. Maybe 1, maybe 2 applications, depending on which team owns that specific application. With the goal being that they no longer need permission from another team to say, hey, am I allowed to make this change? Or at the very least, very rarely do they need to do this. Our original goal, and this will come in importance later, was about 90% team autonomy. We weren't going to go for 100% because we also looked back and said that would be really complex to do at a level that we weren't quite ready yet. Maybe we could build that over time. But we set a realistic goal to say, OK, this will make it easier to make changes now, easier for that incremental updates. Let's just focus on that 90%. How can we get 90% there and not try and go too complex? And what was really neat was we managed to come up with a strategy. So we could actually utilize the old application and just start injecting changes in. This was kind of our first proof of concept that we had laid out and says, OK, let's see if we can actually pull this off. Lo and behold, it actually worked. We were kind of shocked, admittedly. But we needed to make sure we knew what we were doing kind of moving forward. This now lets us say, I want to change a form. We could go as small as a button, kind of a waste of time too. We wanted to make sure we got some good chunks. But now I could start looking at every page, any modal, any section. And we could allow the team to define how much they felt comfortable replacing at one point in time, which also meant no story breakdown would be the same between teams and how they broke down every page, how they break down every modal, how they break down every form. We don't know at this point. But the team can decide that based on what they needed to do. There are a portion where we did have to choose common technologies. So I'm talking about a website here, Abercrombie.com, Hollister.com. We don't want to inject 5 different frameworks into the browser. That's just a bad client experience. So we did need to collaborate and say, OK, what is going to be this baseline that we are going to say, here's your baseline? What are we going to use? We thankfully have an internal design system. This was driven by needing accessibility. A few years ago, pretty much every retailer got sued for accessibility and needed to update everything across their websites. Abercrombie was one of those many. But this drove an amazing experience for everyone because we managed to piece together a design system utilizing some of the older technologies that the team also wanted to migrate into new technologies as well, and in agreement with them as well. One of the main concepts was we tried very hard not to over-engineer the system. How simple can we keep this so that we can keep moving forward? And instead of saying, what if this, what if this, what if this, and trying to plan around it, it became a, we'll solve that if we get to it. This is probably one of the hardest parts of this project, was getting devs to stop over-engineering everything. Myself included. I am a developer, and I am still finding things that says, maybe we should take that piece out that we planned on. And I will note this happened a week ago. Still happening to this day. However, one of the other pieces here is things needed to both be designed and approved by the leads and seniors who were actually going to be working in the application. This is a bit of a culture shift as well that we had to hit. Because now that we have people working in it and approving it and saying, OK, we're good, this also prevented higher-ups from suddenly saying, hey, let's do this. Small piece that I learned looking at the working genius model, as I noted, were an invention, is the higher up you look in an organization, it doubles the voice that happens. So when you have a director invent something, or you have a VP invent something, that might be good, it might be bad, you don't know, it doesn't matter. Their voice has already been multiplied 4 times, 8 times. Suddenly it becomes, oh God, we got to make this work. We didn't care how high in the organization the invention came from. It all came down and had to be fully vetted and approved by the people actually working in the application. So as we're finalizing this, I want to go over, we did some initial proof of concepts to make sure it would work. I do want to go over the 3 Ps, and I think this is important because what you need may vary based on your organization. Proof of concept versus prototype versus pilot. Might be important to write that down so everyone's on the same page, right? Proof of concept is that bare, at least the way we have it defined, so it may be different depending on who you're talking to. Proof of concept is that bare minimum, this is going to work. Thrown away. Prototype for us would be a more full-fledged, full application that we're going to throw away. We just needed that initial piece. A pilot is going to production. We decided to do that proof of concept just enough to say, you know what? I was able to inject that code directly in the old code base, and I got it running. Took about 2 weeks, and then we stopped looking at it because that was about all we really needed. Managed to stand up a small local environment. People are able to work on this, great. From there, we knew a prototype really wouldn't assist us. Because as much as I could flesh out, no one would still be like, but does it work? So we went with a pilot and just stuck something in production and saw what would happen. A little on the crazy part. We did bring in some experienced consultants who had experience with micro front ends, who made some additional pieces to the architecture. That was great. They helped us get started. They managed to bootstrap a few pieces, which was great. Significant amounts of internal discussion going on, like making sure we have everything solidified. And then, kicked off that pilot, getting things into production. And thankfully, there are a lot of side pages on the website that no one knows exists, which are great for that initial implementation, that aren't going to affect direct revenue. If it went down for an hour, most people wouldn't even notice for 3 days. The people that notice are those sitting there at the release, sitting there at least testing. It's like, oh, please work, please work, please work, right? For us, they have 2 pages on the side for subscribe and unsubscribing for emails. To get there, I literally have to go to the search window and type subscribe, and it will take me there. No one knows this page exists. And that allowed us to really lay out that pilot and get it fully blown out there. And of course, we learned a lot of lessons along the way. But at this point, we had something that not only can say, yes, we can do this, it was in prod, and I could check something off as done. So at this point, we've entered the discernment step. So discernment is that idea of taking, OK, we have this invention. We need that, well, a few things. One, we need that gut check of, is this really going to work? Is this going to solve the problem? And some people are naturally gifted at that. Good to know who those people are. And they tend to be those people that you trust to take a lot of ideas to within your organization. I've got 2 or 3 within the organization I'll do that gut check with before we'll even start trying to implement things. But then kind of also sticking that expertise a little bit and saying, OK, let's validate this. So D is for discernment. What we also knew, and so it's important to lay out those risks. What are the risks with doing this? So we knew we could get a temporary performance hit on this because we still have the old technologies and the new technologies coming in as one. And this also drove part of those iterative steps. Implement something, delete the old code, then mark it as done. Please. What's been more fun here, and what's happened a couple times, is people will go in to replace something, see a whole huge portion of dead code that never got deleted from the last time they tried to do something. And so in just deleting that feature, they managed to delete hundreds and hundreds of lines of code that were like, oh, this was dead anyway, great! As they're going in and learning what's there. Because again, we don't know what's there until you get in there. Really defining what do we have to do. So again, we're not going dark. When something comes in, we have to make that explicit decision. Is it going into the old system because it's quick and it would take significantly longer to put in the new one? Or can we get in the new one? But also taking that time to reflect and kind of saying, OK, if we had to implement this in the old one, why? And what could we do differently to make sure that we're ready for these features to go into the new one, allowing us to speed this process up over the course of time. We wanted to greatly improve our automated test coverage. This is one of those great consequences that we had, because right now there's a huge chunk of our code base not under test. And we just can't solidify it in a very decent manner within the current technologies. And if we really want to get to that deployment frequency, which our goal of at this point is 1 day, you need tests that your devs are confident in. Please note, I'm not going to say you need 100% test coverage. If your devs are confident in 80%, that's great. Confidence is what's going to drive it. And when an issue arises, you update that test coverage, and then you move forward. But another portion here is, of course, competencies with these technologies. And this, I will say, blew my mind a little bit. So I get pinged by someone and says, hey, how much training do we need in this new technology? Well, we had been planning on shifting for a good year at this point, and people knew it was coming. All of the seniors, all of the tech leads had already gone off on their own and trained themselves outside of working hours. They paid for courses. They looked at blogs. They were already ready to move forward because that's how on top and how motivated they were to really move forward with this. What better engineers can you ask for that are that motivated, right? Now we move into the galvanizing side. This is the portion I didn't know existed. And I didn't know I was in this stage. That's the fun part. So we're at this point, and we're like, OK, let's start implementing. I'm a dev. I want to go implement something. Right? I ended up in one-on-one discussions. So we had this fear that was happening across all the tech leads and seniors. It's like, but the managers aren't going to let it go forward, but the directors aren't going to let it go forward. Well, how are we going to do this? Here I am just saying, just keep going. I'll see what I can do. So I met with every single one of them, one-on-one. I will say this probably took a couple months. One, everyone's remote and has meetings booked 8 to 5 entirely. So I have to find that 1 hour slot, take in their questions, take in their concerns, go into the documentation, document all of it as to why we're not doing those inventions, because, right? Take it back to the team and make sure we're solidified not doing this, right? Like, yeah, we don't want to do that. Okay, cool. I think we made, out of all my discussions, we made one small shift in the architecture plan. So they were good to have, right? But at the same time, I had to convince all these people, we're not going to use your invention, which no one wants to hear. And it was interesting how across the dev managers, they were completely different sides of where they wanted to go. What I kind of learned is there's an invention step here. And as part of the Working Genius, what I realized is we were going in circles. This is what's referred to as turbulence, where I was bouncing from galvanizing to invention, back to discernment, back to galvanizing, back to invention, back to discernment, back to galvanizing. And it's like, okay, how do I escape this loop? So because everyone had that, and the decision culture here was that in the past, dev managers, who were prior developers for the most part, were also kind of in this architecture-ish role. So if you look at all of our tech designs, at the very bottom were checkboxes for every dev manager. Now, interestingly enough, we're talking about the client-side services. I'm just talking about the front portion of the website. And all the dev managers came from a back-end experience with a very different mindset, a very different type of style of managing people that really didn't click well with the client-side portion. So after discovering Working Genius and saying, OK, I have to get past this galvanizing step, what are we going to do? So there's 7 values. I've got 2 of them in this presentation that are promoted by Abercrombie. So anytime I have to do this, I just say the CEO gave me permissions to do it, because they're all driven by her. And I had to push boundaries a bit. And I had to lean on something. So something at Improving that we really believe in is trust and learning how to build trust. We go over regularly the 4 cores and 13 behaviors defined in the book The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey. And I decided to lean on the last one, extending trust. You cannot start building trust if you're not willing to extend smart trust. And how do we drive this? So I did something that I sat there wondering, oh my God, am I going to lose my job for trying to do this? We finally, I think it was 2-3 weeks later, we found a slot where all the dev managers, all the directors can get in one meeting. And I said, here's the deal. Here's the architecture document. I've did my best to document everything we could. A lot of the fail cases I really didn't want in there, just making it even larger. Like, just in case this happens, just in case this happens, with everyone's inventions and problems they're trying to solve. And said, I don't want you to sign off on it. This going to a lot of people that get to sign off on everything. And instead say, this is defined by your tech leads. Tech leads and seniors put together made up for, I think, 50 to 70 years of client-side experience at this point. All working together to do this. Most of that experience being at Abercrombie, with a lot of other experience too in other organizations, which is good to have that mix. And with that, I said, I want you to let them be accountable. Now, either one of 2 things happened here. Either 1, they actually trusted their tech leads, or 2, none of them wanted to admit they don't trust their tech lead in that meeting. Still not sure which one. That may have been the push in the boundaries there. However, it worked. We finally made it through, and we can finally say, OK, I got the thumbs up. We're moving forward. So the first step was, of course, lots and lots and lots of documentation, building up on what was here. Because now I'm in the enabling stage. I have to enable the teams to really start moving forward. Now, at this time, realized the teams are kind of already moving forward, which kind of made this a lot more fun. Because the teams are just like, we're just going to keep delivering things. Like, no problem here. We're delivering the new architecture. What's the difference? This, of course, has its own flaws. I want to say we had 20+ page sitting in our wiki of a huge variety of things. Trying to take time to organize it and is a full-time job. None of us are especially good at documentation. I have recently learned that documentation specialist's role exists. I wish I had one next to me. Some people are very good at this, at laying things out and reorganizing piece. But I decided to try and experiment, and this really worked well, and it is something that I would actually promote actively. So most of you probably have access to the Microsoft Suite for Office 365, and in it is an area called Stream, Microsoft Stream. So I opened Microsoft Teams, and I created a new meeting that's just me, and recorded myself giving a presentation. These are all 2 to 5 minute presentations, and I made about 10 of them. Just saying, here's the new architecture. So this way I could attract the visual learners a fair bit more, have diagrams, and because I kept them spelled, it also meant I could replace them if something actually changed. The first 3 were targeted at super high level so that anyone in the business can do it. I exposed these to the whole business, trying to stay as transparent as possible, willing to link them to anyone. I had later found out that our wonderful VP actually watched all of them, which made me super happy when anyone in leadership actually looks at this stuff, which is a lot easier than reading through 20 pages of documentation. And this now became part of that onboarding process as well. Someone came in and they at least had that super high level, and go figure, I stopped getting questions about these. But what was nice is as I got more questions, I could just say, oh, more questions target here. I'm going to make a small video about it and add it into the list. So this made it really easy to define, here's a nice list of videos, short and sweet, very descriptive, in a way that people were able to consume that way easier than saying, go read this gigantic wiki. So I got a lot of compliments for this wiki page. And it really took me a while why. But what we had laid out, and we had it for a while, was every single page, every single modal across the entire website. And there's a lot. And we also had to define, OK, who owns what, and put this in here. At the time, there were no numbers on the side. I'll get to how those got there later. Of course, I took the screenshot a few days ago. But I got a lot of praise for this, and I couldn't really figure out why. So my goal with this was just, all I care about are 3 statuses. It hasn't started yet, it's in progress, or it's done. And that way I could see this whole thing colored green at some point. And I love this visual aspect. I'm a very visual person, visual kinesthetic learner. So very visual. And then after a while, I realized why. I don't know if anyone remembers the old Windows disk defrag command that you had to do to reorganize your hard drive. You really don't see this anymore. But I remember as a kid getting to run this, and I just watched it. I don't know why. But it was really cool to see it manipulate everything, and I could easily visually see what was done. And that's when it occurred to me, OK, this is actually a really neat way to kind of be able to visually see that project in chunks. It didn't need to be super clean, but I could see this thing turn green over the course of time. And it really just helped give that visual reference. Now, of course, from a project management side, I need a more thorough, here's the % done, things of that nature. So, of course, that leads to, and I'm serious when I say super awesome VP, and I'll explain why later. What is the timeline? Now, this coming from a guy who actually doesn't care, because the whole point was, we're going to do this incrementally. We're going to keep delivering features. It'll happen. But trying to do my best to assist everyone, assist the stakeholders involved. We had to figure out a way to do this. So I went back and said, OK, basic agile concept of sizing out a project. Let's look at complexity and see where this leads. So I utilize Microsoft Planner as a simple way of saying, give me columns, put numbers above it, list everything off to each team, and I let the seniors and leads kind of define, okay, now remember, we don't have requirements on these pages, but I can look at the subscribe page and compare it to the checkout page and compare it to the home page very easily. That's pretty much all we could really do is say, we know the complexities of each page relative to each other. And that's the whole point of the process, right? So we get this laid out. And then I have the super awesome project manager sitting in front of me here. I told her I'd point her out during it, which took this into Microsoft Project, a platform I still don't understand. And this was pretty much the only image that I understood of the entire thing she was talking about, which helped us lay out, OK, laying out per point. Let's look at a week and a half. Let's look at 2 weeks. Let's kind of get that estimate as to how long this would take based on what capacity we can put in that team, and just kind of rough it up. And then I'll validate it with the teams and say, does this feel right? Does it, and have that initial gut check. And so this came out to be about 2 years, and I'll give the +6 or -6 months because we have a cone of uncertainty. We know at the very beginning of a project, there's a wide amount of uncertainty there. And hopefully as we go, as we discover, were we right on those initial point estimates? Is it going to take longer? Is it going to take smaller? What's going to be different per team? And we actually laid it out. Based on those complexity numbers, even I could tell one team had sizes slightly smaller than the other teams, and so forth. So we didn't even use the same measurement on every team. We were still able to stick with that team's way of kind of laying things out. And this makes everyone happy, except for the whole point of it's taking 2 years, and no one wants to hear that. But again, our goal is don't block current features coming in. I'm going to keep that in mind. So this kind of works its way through the enablement side of we're laying things out. We're trying to get things in pieces so the teams can move forward. We have the BAs working on creating all of our wonderful Jira tickets, working with the team as they get to a feature, breaking down those stories, and moving forward. So we move into my favorite of the 7 cores from Abercrombie. It's the only reason I can throw it up there, is we have to get shit done. We have to keep moving forward. We have to keep delivering the existing features, but we also want to see things migrate over. Now, the fun part here is by the time we're at this point, the teams have already been moving, and we've migrated 3 features. We never really needed to do most of this planning piece just to at least keep things moving forward, which has been great. But we also have some challenges along the way, of course. But what was also nice is thanks to that wonderful galvanizing step, and I didn't try and bypass anyone with it, the dev managers were also assisting with driving this moving forward. Oh, that's a new feature. Why are you doing that in the old system? Shouldn't you be over here? Because now I had all the teams around it. That galvanizing step was unbelievably useful that I never knew existed. The getting shit done side of this, before I forget, that last step is tenacity. And that is the, OK, here we're actually implementing. Here we're actually checking off those boxes. So of course, the question always comes up, OK, 2.5 years. But of course, it comes in, can we get this done faster? And this is, of course, scary to everyone. No one really wants to hear this, right? We don't want to push everyone too hard into burnout range. So remember that super awesome VP I mentioned earlier? Well, she didn't just say, hey, everyone, work harder. What can we actually do from the business side to assist our teams and empowering them to move forward? This is a lesson I hope everyone can learn here, or everyone in the world can learn, is this isn't just about work harder, let pets come to the office so they don't have to go home and take care of their pets, And really, what we needed was that ability to say, OK, start moving forward. Now, of course, everything that happens is anytime you have change, you're going to have some complexities with it. We have to get used to it. So what she managed to do, though, is we finally managed to create that full separation from an organization standpoint between the client sides and the back-end services, which was super beneficial, not just for us, but for the entire organization. Because again, the back-end services needed to support us and applications and the apps, iOS, Android apps, and the point of sale in the stores, same services being used throughout. We also got a director that was able to come in and work directly with the client-side teams, who has a lot of experience on that front, who's able to come in, kind of help drive us forward a lot more, and really vouch for those teams specifically. Consistently more hiring coming in order to help grow those teams specifically, getting some more blood in there to assist along the way, which of course brings in some onboarding issues, like were we ready for this? Fun note, it's a lot of organizations are still getting used to their remote work. It takes time to get people laptops, as it turns out. Same issue here. I'm also hearing way worse issues at other organizations, so that's always fun to hear about. But we also defined, so the team that I'm on is the platform team. It used to be referred to as the architecture innovation team. But the whole concept behind this team has always been like empower the other teams. What can we do to help those teams move forward? So as we get through these these challenges, we're always changing a lot of our third parties around. The business is always driving, listening to salesmen across the board says, oh, our tool is better, or our tool is better, and we still have to keep up with this. So changing content vendors. The big one for us was changing how we did translations for the website. As I noted, we support, I think, 7 or 8 different languages across the board in different things. And we actually had to fundamentally change how our architecture works with these translations. And that was that kind of prerequisite before moving forward. We had a workaround. I wanted to get people out of that workaround. So it kind of created that. But it also pushed some accountability on those back-end teams and saying, hey, here's something you now need to support for everyone. It kind of gave them that first challenge of really what to do here. And words are hard. So one of the technologies chosen was React. It is a very popular front-end framework. Most people here have probably heard of it. We use about, within this new architecture, 6 or 7 very major frameworks that we decided on to kind of push things through. React is less than 10% of the actual code base we are writing, but that is now the official name of the project, because that's the word that stuck. And that's why I say, no one really wanted to say, so it's a continuous delivery project, way too long. Everyone just kind of stuck with React. So anything that goes well or poorly will get blamed by Facebook, on the word React, right? Facebook being the one who develops React. However, what was really nice is there's a lot of reinforcement on the 4 metrics coming from the architectural side of the business as well. As I noted, this was brought up a couple years ago and really said, hey, we're going to drive these across the board. And so our architecture team was actually focused on how can we measure these so that we know we're successful throughout this. And this is such that important concept of driving towards those metrics. We still have that challenge, as I kind of noted, is like, what if we did it in the old system, and finding that balance. Something that I discovered, because we, as devs, we really wanted to just say, put it all in the new system, put it all in the new system. Confirmation bias exists throughout tech. It's so easy for us to say, but we're going to have better test coverage, but it'll move faster. It'll be a better experience for the user. And we can list off 20 different advantages. But because of that, it's so difficult to listen to the problem the business actually cares about, which is delivering these features to the user. And we can't lose sight of that. And it's important to communicate with them and listen and take that step back and make sure you can identify where you've kind of drawn in that bias. We've also started, what I had recently learned about, is lean UX and dual track agile. And the business is now kind of, in order to assist each team in learning, okay, how do we work with the business? How do we make sure we're solving real business values and working with the team in defining those? We're really hoping this will help enable those teams from getting there. And then probably the biggest challenge that I've had in literally the last few weeks is what is actually done, like right now when I look at that chart. And keeping track of that, hopefully in a more automated fashion, rather than people going into a wiki and updating it. I have discovered Excel. Apparently, a lot of project managers love this tool, and now I know why. Unfortunately, you have to do a lot of manual updates. Being the programmer that I am, there's also a lot of macros, and I can hit APIs with it. And I was about ready to go in and start writing code inside of Excel to go do some of the stuff for me. Didn't quite get there, but it's still in my to-do list of something I'm tempted to do. More things. Well, as part of that, what is done, right, we have to keep everything transparent. And the challenge here is, depending who you talk to, you may get a different answer of, do I need to tell the business which technology I'm adding this feature into, right? Should the business only be concerned about, the features going in and that's it? Or should I be more transparent in saying, yes, we're implementing it in the new, we've sized out what it would take in each one. We've looked at it, it'll only take 10% longer to put in this new one, but it'll cost you this much less in the long run. And therefore, we've decided to go with that. How transparent should we be? And that's still kind of in discussion as to how transparent that should be. Collaboration with all stakeholders. One thing I noted in the part of the galvanizing side is making sure that you've talked to everyone involved, your dev managers, your business, your project managers. Something that, this was kind of a mistake I made, and that I made a lot of assumptions. Oh, I talked with the director. The director will talk to the BAs about it. I don't know why I thought this. Not everyone knows about the 4 metrics yet. Not everyone knows that our goal is to deliver 3 times more CapEx projects a year. We want to help the business. We're trying to drive faster, right? Where are those end goals? Being careful not to let the if statements prevent it from moving forward. This was a huge one as we were defining this architecture. We had if A happens, if B happens, if C happens, if D happens, and I'm starting to document every single portion of it. And now kind of learning, 90% of the if statements never happen, but we're worried about it. So how can we drive more towards that MVP and really getting things through without trying to worry too much, but enough, right? You still need to think about security and how that's going to matter and data transferring. You still have to have a bit of a plan there. Keeping commitments as small as possible, as often as possible, this is a huge portion of driving trust, right? We still want to commit to getting the work done. We still want to be efficient with it, but we also want to make sure we're meeting our done criteria. What is that team's done criteria? Does it have the test coverage? Are there errors being thrown everywhere? Well, that's probably bad because that'll hurt us in the long run. Also remembering that technology is just a tool, right? As I noted, we implemented 6, 7 technologies, all with the purpose of taking care of what it is really good at. I haven't had to talk about them here because they're not, which one I chose isn't as important. The goal is, are we able to deliver these features? And at what cost does that technology come in? So since I submitted this presentation, because I told myself I would try and give updates all the way up to today, whatever today is, right? The architecture's changed a bit, right? Director came in and said, hey, I want you to go a little bit more autonomous than what you guys are looking at. And we want to define it this way. Now, of course, being the brand new director, right? I still took the same approach. It went back to the seniors and leads. We did a comparison of each. We saw what would be good, what would be bad. We even made it clear this is going to be slightly harder to implement, but it will give us better autonomy. And we all agreed, yes, we can move this direction, and we're willing to do that. And everyone's willing to consume and take on that idea. But it went through its own invention, dissertation, galvanizing process. I'm currently in the middle of that enablement side. So I can't talk to that one as much, of really making it forward so teams can move forward with it. We're doing consistent hiring in order to help enable these teams. This is how we're kind of getting stuck on a little bit of that onboarding piece. Is like, OK, we got to make sure people are ready to get their laptops and keep moving with this. And what's currently been in work for the last few days has been an structure board in Jira. I had never heard of this before. It essentially lays off this entire project, and I'm told it can do anything and everything I want to. I'm just learning how, in hopes to replace the Excel sheets that everyone's making right now. With the end goal being, so as we've been laying this out, I've been kind of doing it, or testing something to just say, what do you think can you get done each quarter? And that's it, super high level. just so I can look at Q4 this year, what's in progress, what do you need help with? Can we shift that team around? Because it's not about saying, oh, you got to work harder. Oh, we need you to work more hours. It's, oh, you're behind in this piece. Hey, someone from the platform team can come help you hear this. Oh, someone from the customer team, they've got someone who's not really doing anything right now. They can come assist you guys with this feature so that all the teams can really work on getting their goals done throughout the year without that insane pressure at the same time. And with that, that's where we are now. I'm hoping in a year I can come back and say, and the whole thing's replaced. But I at least wanted to come kind of give that foreboding and saying, so in a year I can either say, yes, it worked. No, it didn't. Here's more mistakes. Here's more findings as we get through it. So any questions?
I have a question.
Oh.
How do you balance the transparency conversation with the business? How do you balance letting them know how things are working versus the what and having too many cooks in the kitchen? Something I've noticed is when you share with the business, they want to help you with the how. Mm-hmm. And okay, that's not really their skill set. So, and try to separate the how from the what.
So the question, for those who couldn't hear, I'll try and summarize it a bit, is how do we balance with the business and the business wanting to help with the hows and not just the what they want done? That is probably one of the biggest challenges so far that we have been having because, again, a lot of them kind of come back and say, why don't you just do it in the old system, right? It'll be faster. And the fun part about that is really making sure we're transparent with that piece because I guarantee you, no one told them it would be faster in the older system. It's an assumption, right? Again, we all live by our, it's very easy to fall into that confirmation bias of, I know my way, I know the way it should be done, it should be here, and just taking that step back and making sure we're as transparent as possible with, here's why we're looking at the new system for this, without denying the fact that sometimes it is better to do it in the old. Especially when it's like, oh, it's a quick bug fix, or it's a really tiny, few line change, we don't need to migrate everything. Because that migration step does have a decent cost to it. And if I try and go too small with it, it has an increasing greater cost. So we're trying to make sure we're tackling the right size feature when we do migrate it, and being able to kind of promote it going forward. An interesting piece and an interesting challenge with it also is some of our teams have had some turnover over the course of the last few years where we've lost a couple tech leads. And so we've got these tech leads going in having to inherit this old code base. And so it's also an opportunity for them to say, here's the deal. As I look through this old piece, no one here knows what it does or how it works. So we can replace it now and we'll all know how it works, which has also been part of that conversation as well and part of that challenge.
That exact comment right there is why I chose to sit in on this.
Oh, good.
Going through a project, a replacement project. So that hits them.
Well, hope it was useful.
Yes.
Okay. So.
I actually have two. The first one is you started with saying there was not much financial support into the project, and now you're talking about 10 plus people hires. When did that change?
So the interesting piece is the 10 plus hires is coming in to do more features, right? When the director came in, the entire concept was let's empower these teams to move forward long term. This isn't just a short term, just for the replacement piece, right? Obviously, we want to be able to put a few more resources on this project as much as possible, but also the business just has more features they want to deliver. And we're hoping with this separation, especially from the API teams, and the client teams can really more focus in on their applications, we're able to focus those features as well and really drive things more forward. He's come in with a lot of ideas and a lot of directions for every team to move in that we haven't been able to in the past. And that's really what's driven that hiring portion. So I should say the hiring is not directly towards this project. So I think that's a great point to put out. So.
Okay, and the second one I have is you mentioned a couple times discussing with the VAs, stakeholders. At what stage and was it the true website users feedback collected? The actual, not Abercrombie and Fitch employees, but the end users. Was it?
So that hasn't happened because our goal with the website is to not change their experience. I was actually thinking of putting a slide up there of like a before and after to see if anyone could spot the difference with no differences. Most of what they're going to get in the ideal world, assuming we are successful, is going to be a faster website, which no one's going to complain about. That has its own metrics behind it. Good luck finding those. There's a few case studies done about how every second is worth, X amount. I think our primary goal from the user case is when holiday comes, which of course it's retail, everything's driven by what's going to happen on holiday, right? Is have as few 500 error pages as possible. And to be clear, I took a couple months to develop a project based on the business desire to put content on the 500 error page, because other businesses could do this, to make sure, because it wasn't a, yeah, we trust you guys, there won't be any 500s this year. It's a put content there, right? Because we know users are there. Now, of course, our goals as IT is we don't want anyone to ever see that content. And that is also driving a huge portion of this, as well as the ramped up speed. Because we do believe that a portion of that user experience is being caused by the old legacy system. No one knows how to fix it. Or we just keep scaling up to the point of we can't anymore, and trying to just provide that better user experience overall. But the features on the website should not be different to the user unless it was specifically noted by like an incoming CapEx project or capital funded project at the same time, which they've already engaged the users for those, I believe.
I just wondering, you talk about it seems like today things are changing so fast that we have to start continually rewriting our applications.
So one thing I believe is that every time you choose a technology and you get in there, you're kind of gambling on how long it's going to last, right? There was a point in time when the latest and greatest technology was COBOL, right? We can't, it's not a, a lot of people don't necessarily think of it from that perspective when they're like, oh, we'll go greenfield and we'll implement this technology and the grass will always be greener for the rest of time. The most we can do is for the foreseeable future, right? Our choice of a technology, for example, React, is that we believe it will be sustainable for the foreseeable future, right? And that's based on a history. But it's based on watching the presentations on those technologies and seeing how it's advancing with the times. It's based on looking at all these other greenfield technologies that the Facebook team kind of went back to that says, oh, we can do that too, ha 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 ha, and has kept up with that course of time. But we also want to make sure we're updating regularly as well, when it comes to package versions, security checks, things of that nature as well. So I don't want to take it from the perspective of we'll always be rewriting it. For all we know, websites won't exist in 5 years, right? So that's why I'm kind of going like with that foreseeable future concept as well.
So, just curious, your developers, were they like full stack? Did they do front end and back end, or were they specific to front end and you having the group specific to back end for this project and what were pros and cons?
So the majority of the devs are focused on front end, and I should say they were officially front end engineers. Like I came in, I'm primarily a front end engineer. I have a very full stack background. I've helped them out with database queries and things of that nature as need be. But the roles themselves are fairly separated. I think the separation of the teams kind of helped define that more, because it's also the applications themselves also separating a bit more and enabling a lot more focus. The teams as a whole were full stack at the time. Anyone else? All good. Okay. Well, thank you so much. So I did probably pop it up here. So A&F is also recruiting lots of dev positions. If you know any front ends, it is one of the best places to work. If anyone's interested in consulting, improving has been one of the top places to work for longer than I've been there. both of these companies literally reach out, get surveys done, trying to improve their cultures as a whole regularly. So I do want to promote both of them there. And if you're interested at all in the working genius model I went over, I'm going to go through it much more thoroughly in different varieties on this type of working genius tomorrow at 9:30. So feel free to reach out. I love talking about this stuff. I just love talking till my voice is hoarse. So thank you all so much for coming. I really appreciate it.